So, this is part of a major research project which is underway at SOAS at the University of London at the moment. And the project is called Maqām Beyond Nation. What we're doing is exploring shared traditions of music making across Asia. So this image here really references the 20th century development of national Maqām repertoires across Asia. So this is from Uzbekistan, and it really demonstrates this kind of still ongoing emphasis on Maqām as a symbol of nation, these kind of discrete national repertoires that really have overlaid a much more fluid and shared history of music making in this region. So our project, Maqām Beyond Nation, is really working against these kind of canonical projects. What we're doing is tracing the pre-national links and also the contemporary movements to reconnect Maqām across borders. So we're working in Iran and Azerbaijan, on Ottoman revivals in Turkey. But this particular strand that we want to talk about today is working across the former Soviet Chinese border. So this is a project of reconnection between Uyghur and Uzbek Maqām traditions.
So we planned on bringing two Uyghur musicians and two Uzbek musicians. We selected musicians we appreciated either from our own past collaborations or from their engagement in collaborative projects. I have been working with Saniem Ismail, a prominent Uyghur artist from Kazakhstan, over the past few years. We performed in different international music festivals and made some recordings. She brought a young musician, Bahadır Iminjan, a 18-year-old self-taught musician from Chilek. We asked Güzel Mominova, a teacher at the Yunus Rajabi Music Institute in Tashkent, if she was interested in this project, and she convinced Abror Zufarov, a classical music master, to join the project. At the beginning, it was not easy to bring everyone together in a Telegram group chat. The lack of responses to some of our questions created uncertainty and anxiety. We tried to engage by starting a conversation about a joint repertoire, but it was not very successful. Then we went to other musicians who had experiences in both Uyghur and Uzbek Maqām repertoires. We listed a few pieces from both repertoires and shared them in a YouTube playlist format. So before we gathered everyone in Tashkent in March 2025, we were very anxious about whether this idea of collaboration would ever work or it will collapse. Of course, everything changed when we were all in the same space.
So after the kind of tensions of planning, it was really amazing to get into the rehearsal room. So really what we're sharing with you now is a work in progress. This is really the results of just those 3 days rehearsal in Tashkent in Uzbekistan. So what can we learn? What can we achieve from being in a rehearsal space with these musicians who are deeply rooted in their own respective traditions, and when they're thrown together with musicians from a neighbouring tradition? So our project is really rooted in the tradition of practice-based research. As Ellen Waterman says, practice is itself a form of critical thought. And these ideas, these approaches, take a great deal from Dwight Conquergood's ideas on dialogical performance and performative ethnography. So the emphasis on reflexive and critical praxis. So showing rather than telling, as Deborah Wong puts it nicely in less exclusionary language. So what does that mean? We take seriously the embodied experience that's gained through practice. We aim to blur the boundaries and the hierarchies between researchers and participants. And we are particularly interested in the details of situated performance. And fundamentally, we are interested in using this as a contribution to decolonizing scholarship, as Tina Ramnarine says, a form of decolonial praxis. So this is about studying alongside people, not turning them into subjects for our own intellectual inquiry.
From the very beginning, we knew we wanted to document the different stages of the rehearsal process, as well as the outcome of this musical collaboration between Uzbek and Uyghur artists. The idea was to produce an ethnographic film that could serve both as a form of creative dissemination and as a research output aimed at a wider audience. Filming rehearsals, especially in a cross-cultural and artistic context like this one, offers an opportunity to reflect on the dynamics of collaboration, negotiation, etc. The approach draws from the field of visual anthropology, particularly the work of Sarah Pink, who advocates for a sensory and situated engagement with the field. Pink reminds us that visual documentation is never neutral. It always carries the presence, the perspectives, and the affects of the person behind the camera. And similarly, Baptiste Biop, whose work focuses on the intersection between ethnography and creative practices, invites us to think of the camera not as a passive tool, but as a co-actor in the research process. In this approach, filming is itself a form of participation, a way to engage with the field that is performative, reflexive, and co-constructed. In our case, the camera became part of the rehearsal space to accompany the unfolding of a shared musical repertoire in the making. To remain as discreet as possible, I decided to film everything with my smartphone using the Blackmagic camera app, which allowed me to manually adjust settings and remain flexible during the rehearsal process. Choosing this lightweight and familiar tool was important, not only for practical reasons, but also because it helped create more relaxed atmosphere. The musicians were less distracted, less self-conscious that than they might have been with a large camera and professional crew in the room. Over time, the phone became a natural extension of the rehearsal process. Um, the footages we collected over these 3 days was later edited and shared to support creative work itself. It is a way to reflect on what had happened during this 3 days of rehearsal and to prepare for our first concerts in October in Almaty and in Tashkent. From a research perspective, this material offers very interesting insights. It allows us to revisit the moments of hesitation, joy, and improvisation that shaped this collaborative process that you will see in the videos that we will share. We see not only how this musical repertoire is negotiated through listening and playing together, but also how trust is built among these musicians through humor and body language. These micro interactions, often lost in written or recorded accounts, are essential to understand the complexity of artistic co-creation.
Let's have a look at a few of those moments then. So, our first clip is from the moment when they were rehearsing a collaboration based on Nawa, Mukām. This is the Mukaddimeh, the opening section.
So imagine this is like the first time they collaborate together. They only spent 3 days in the same room, but what this video captures is like this very intense listening from musicians who was in this room, and also mutual appreciation of each other's repertoire, which is similar but not the same. But there's Rachel will tell us more about the sound that they're producing.
Yeah, it's always really amazing to revisit the video. I find myself looking at listening to new things every time. So one thing that Saniem in particular, the singer there, the one thing that she was really focused on was this question of micro style, really, the prak, the flavor of the music. So she was interested in these slightly different ways of producing ornaments, depending on whether you're playing the Uzbek sator, the long-necked bowed Uzbek lute, or if you're playing the satar, the Uyghur long-necked bowed lute. These tiny differences. And for all of us, there was this great pleasure somehow in finding, something that is very familiar and yet slightly different. Very interesting, and so very easy for the musicians actually to kind of riff off what the other was doing because of that, familiar but slightly strange. And actually, I felt that this kind of encounter and these kind of processes that were going on in the rehearsal is something that my colleague in the UK, Byron Dueck, has written about very nicely. But Byron is actually writing about jazz rehearsals, but he has some very interesting and very relevant ideas about musical intimacy and imaginaries that go on in the rehearsal space. So the way that the musicians are focused on each other, but they're also referencing so much kind of experience and ideology from outside the space. Very interesting.
So the next clip that we will see is also very interesting. It goes on this direction of mutual listening and interacting and sharing this kind of moments. Saniem and the Abror really connected around this poem of Baba Rahim Meshrab. Baba Rahim Meshrab is a 17th century Sufi poet and musician. His poetry still resonates deeply in both Uyghur and Uzbek oral and spiritual traditions. For the whole rehearsal, this was a particularly meaningful moment when Saniem and Abror were singing, trying to sing this poem together. What was fascinating for us as well in that room is that we all discovered together how the same verses are set to rhythm differently in two different traditions. So here's the glimpse of like how that finding out that this tiny differences went through.
So here's the clip then of the two musicians singing together this poem by Babarim Meshrep, which is set again to Nawa Mukam Jula Sanem.
Tufaniyet yağdan kestim beni yoklar şimdi
That is a very funny moment. Yeah, Abro on the right there is just so great. He's really up for it, even though that pitch range is a little high for him, but he's really going for it. So these are wonderful, effective moments you can hear going on. They're also having fun, and then they're starting to explore that question of rhythm. You know, what is the drum rhythm for this particular clip, and how does the poetic meter fit onto that rhythm? Very interesting. Uh, so we talked a bit after the rehearsals about the approach of one like mid-20th century European scholar called Alfred Schutz, really a phenomenologist. And he's written quite a lot about the mutual tuning in relationship between musicians. And it was quite interesting to reflect on his work. Obviously, very much focused on the Western classical tradition, another time and another place. But there were interesting things that we could take from Schutz's writing. Um, this fundamental idea of tuning in was quite helpful for us when we're thinking about that kind of that moment of engagement, those sparks that occur or perhaps going back again to Byron Dweck and his idea of intimacies. So lots of interesting thinking there going on about those effective moments of connection. So this is Abror Zufarov in interview after the end of the rehearsals, and it was very nice to hear him reflecting on what we've been doing in ways that really highlight the value, I think, of practice-based research.
Bu proyektni go'zal orqali bildim. Bundan ancha vaqt oldin. Keyin sizlar bilan Telegramda gaplashdik. Boshida tushunmadim. Boshida nima haqida, nima Uyg'urlar bilan birga chalamiz, konsert qo'yamiz. Uncha tushunmadim boshida. Keyingi vaqtlarda tushuna boshladim. Yaxshi ko'raman Uyg'ur musiqasini bilan angladim. Yo'q, faqat hozirdek emas. Hozir ko'p o'ylardim meni ilmiy ishimga Uyg'ur musiqasini, Uyg'ur maqomi kerak deb plan qilib yurardim. Qachondir chuqurroq o'rganaman Uyg'ur maqomlarini. Chunki men o'ylaymanki, Uyg'ur maqomlari bilan juda yaqin yoki bizni qadimda ustozlarimiz Uyg'urlardan olib kelgan maqommi yoki bu yerdan bu yoqqa borgan yoki umumiy bo'lgan. Buni menga juda ham qiziq bu narsa. Shu sababli bu proyekt menga juda ham yoqdi. Ayniqsa mana oxirgi kun 3 kun repetitsiya qilganimizda oz vaqt ichida juda ko'p informatsiya oldik va chalib birga ko'p ishlarni bitirdik deb o'ylayman. Va buni menga natijasi yana qiziq bo'lib turibdi. Konsert berish haqida o'ylayapman. Chiroyli chiqishini. Mana kecha o'sha repetitsiyada ko'rdik. Ba'zi bir narsalarni biz teoretik o'ylagan narsalarimiz amaliyotda o'zgardi. Ba'zi bir joyda yo'q bunaqa chalish kerak ekan, bo'tini bunday chalamiz deb o'zgartirib hozir meni fikrimcha eshituvchiga juda ham qiziq bir programma paydo bo'ladi deb o'ylayman.
I think we've got an interesting program there as well. And there are a couple of very interesting things about what he's saying there. I think one is his sense that the other tradition, the Uyghur tradition, somehow preserves some ancient essence of Maqām, which has been lost in his own tradition. That's quite interesting. But what I really like about that clip is the way that he's really highlighting the value of practice-based research. It's helping him to refine and expand his own kind of research, which I think is great.
So, as a conclusion, this collaborative rehearsal process, as documented through a discrete camera angle, reveals not only the construction of a shared musical repertoire, but also the subtle waving of mutual understanding through embodied interaction. What Schutz calls the vivid present, that shared sense of being together, was really at the core of our rehearsals. The camera didn't just record what happened, it became part of the moment. It helped shape a space where co-creation could emerge. In the end, the way of documenting creative process pushes us as researchers and artists to reflect not only on what we see or hear, but on how we share presence. Thank you very much.
And thank you.